So today the Indiana Fever, well yesterday, say goodbye to who was one of the most important players especially early on in the year, Temi Fagbennel. Could this be the most obvious trade demand we've ever seen in the WNBA? Satou Sabally, the Dallas Wings all-star forward, is doing everything but directly saying she wants to join the Indiana Fever. So she's come out and said she's a free agent, and then over time said Satou teaming up with Caitlin kind of here for that narrative. From strategically liking social media posts to dropping hints about teaming up with Caitlin Clark, Sabally's making waves that could reshape the WNBA's power structure. But here's what's really interesting. The Wings might be forced to make a move they don't want to make. Stay tuned to find out why this could be the biggest story of the WNBA offseason. Temi Fagbennel was a superb player for the Fever, and she was like the first of all the actually gel with what Caitlin Clark wanted to do because Temi Fagbennel liked to run as well. Let's dive deep into the digital breadcrumbs that Satou Sabally has been strategically leaving across social media. And trust me, this isn't your typical athlete social media activity. This is a masterclass in sending a message without saying a word. First off, let's talk about Instagram, where Sabally has been particularly active. She started by announcing her free agency status, which isn't unusual, but what followed definitely raised some eyebrows. Here's where it gets interesting. Sabally didn't just randomly like posts. She specifically engaged with content about joining the Indiana Fever and teaming up with Caitlin Clark. And let's be clear, there were plenty of other teams fans commenting and posting about wanting her to join their squads. Chicago Sky fans were particularly vocal, but notice something? Zero engagement with those posts. It's like she's wearing Indiana-colored glasses while scrolling through her feed. But it's not just about what she's liking. It's about the timing and pattern. Every time there's a post about her potential move to Indiana, boom. There's Sabally's almost immediately. She's even gone as far as engaging with posts that explicitly discuss her teaming up with Caitlin Clark in Indiana. This isn't coincidence, folks. This is calculated. What makes this even more fascinating is how different this approach is from typical WNBA free agency behavior. Usually players keep their cards close to their chest, maybe drop a few vague hints here and there. But Sabally? She's practically skywriting her intentions. She's liked posts about free agent Satou to Indiana. She's engaged with content about joining forces with the Fever's young core. And she's been consistently active on posts discussing Indiana's potential super team. And let's talk about timing for a second. These aren't just random likes spread out over months. There's been a clear escalation in her social media activity, particularly after the college season started and Caitlin Clark began making headlines again. It's almost like Sabally's saying, hey, I see what's building in Indiana, and I want to be part of it. What's particularly telling is her engagement with fan-created graphics showing her in a Fever jersey. In the WNBA, where players typically shy away from such speculative content to avoid tampering accusations, Sabally's boldness stands out. She's not just leaving breadcrumbs. She's leaving entire loaves of bread leading straight to Indianapolis. When we talk about timing in professional sports, it rarely aligns as perfectly as what we're seeing with Satou Sabally and the Indiana Fever right now. Let's break down exactly why this moment is absolutely crucial for both parties. First, let's address the elephant in the room. Sabally isn't just any free agent. She's arguably the best realistic free agent available in this year's market. Sure, if you're looking at the top-tier free agents on paper, you've got Breanna Stewart at the top of that list, but let's be real for a second. Stewart has already made it clear she's staying with the Liberty. They're building something special in New York, and she's not going anywhere. Then you've got players like Duana Bonner and Nneka Ogwumike who are either staying put or have specific destinations in mind. So Satou Sabally, she is arguably the best free agent available. This essentially makes Sabally the crown jewel of this free agency class. And here's where the timing gets even more interesting. She's hitting free agency at the absolute peak of her powers. We're talking about a player who just had a breakout season, averaging career highs across the board. She's not just a good player. She's evolved into a legitimate superstar. But the timing isn't just perfect from Sabally's perspective. The Fever are sitting in what might be the most pivotal moment in their franchise history. They've got Aaliyah Boston, who's already shown she can be a cornerstone player. They've got the excitement building around Caitlin Clark's potential arrival. The pieces are there, but there's still something missing, that veteran superstar who can bridge the gap between potential and championship contention. Look at the salary cap situation too. The Fever have positioned themselves perfectly to make a big splash in free agency. They've maintained flexibility while building through the draft, and now they have the space to offer a max contract to someone like Sabally. This kind of financial flexibility, combined with a young core on rookie contracts, is rare in the WNBA. There's also the market factor to consider. Indiana isn't typically seen as a prime free agent destination, but that narrative is changing. The Fever's young core, their playing style, and the potential addition of Caitlin Clark have transformed them from a rebuilding team to one of the most intriguing destinations in the league. Sabally could be the player who validates this transformation and opens the door for other stars to consider Indiana in the future. And let's not forget about the competitive landscape of the WNBA. With super teams forming in New York and Las Vegas, there's a real opportunity for another team to emerge as a counterbalance. The Fever, with their young talent and potential additions, could position themselves as that team. Sabally wouldn't just be joining a team. She'd be joining a movement. Let's paint a picture that should have WNBA fans everywhere sitting up in their seats. Imagine a starting lineup that could genuinely challenge the league's current power structure. We're talking about Satou Sabally potentially joining forces with some of the most exciting talents in women's basketball. And let me tell you why this isn't just another super team. This could be something entirely different. First, let's talk about the centerpiece, Caitlin Clark. Whether she declares for the draft or not, the Fever are positioning themselves for her arrival. We're talking about a generational talent who's rewriting the college record books and changing how people view women's basketball. Her long-range shooting and court vision are already legendary, and she hasn't even stepped foot on a WNBA court yet. Now add Aaliyah Boston to the mix. The former #1 pick has already shown she can dominate at the professional level. Her rookie season wasn't just good, it was historically good. Boston brings elite interior defense, efficient scoring, and the kind of high basketball IQ that makes everyone around her better. The chemistry between Clark and Boston alone would be worth the price of admission. But here's where Sabally changes everything. At 6 feet 4 inches with guard skills, she's the perfect modern WNBA player. We're talking about someone who can guard multiple positions, shoot the three, create her own shot, and still dominate in the paint when needed. Last season, she averaged nearly 19 points and 8.5 rebounds per game. Those aren't just all-star numbers. Those are superstar numbers. The spacing this team would have would be absolutely ridiculous. Imagine trying to defend a pick and roll with Clark and Boston while Sabally is spotting up for three. Or picture Sabally driving to the basket while Clark spaces the floor from logo range. The defensive nightmares this would create for opposing teams are endless. And let's not forget about Kelsey Mitchell in this equation. She's been carrying the scoring load for the Fever for years, and now she'd have multiple all-star caliber teammates to work with. Mitchell's ability to create her own shot would become even more deadly when defenses can't focus solely on her. The bench depth would be solid too. Players like Grace Berger and Lexi Hull would provide valuable minutes and maintain the team's high-energy style of play. This wouldn't just be a starting five, this would be a complete team built to compete for championships. But perhaps the most exciting aspect of this potential lineup is its longevity. We're not talking about a one-year window here. Boston is 22, Clark would be a rookie, and Sabally is just 25. This core could potentially dominate the league for the next 5 to 7 years. Minimum. That's not just building a team, that's building a dynasty. Now, let's dive into the nuts and bolts of how this potential move could actually happen. Because in the WNBA, wanting something and making it happen are two very different things. The Dallas Wings have several options here, but each comes with its own set of complications and consequences. First, let's talk about the core designation. The Wings could technically core Sabally, which would give them exclusive negotiating rights. Think of it as the WNBA's version of the franchise tag. On paper, this seems like the obvious move. You don't let a young superstar walk away for nothing, right? But here's where history teaches us a valuable lesson. Remember the Elena Del Don situation? When she wanted out of Chicago, they cored her, but she made it clear she wouldn't play there. The result? She sat out until a trade was worked out. More recently, we saw a similar situation with Diana Taurasi in Phoenix. The lesson here is clear. In the WNBA, forcing players to stay rarely works out for anyone involved. Then there's the salary cap situation to consider. Under the current CBA, a Supermax contract would pay Sabally around $241,984 annually. That's a significant investment, but for a player of her caliber, it's actually a bargain compared to other professional sports. The Fever have positioned themselves beautifully here. They have the cap space to offer this kind of contract without gutting their roster. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Wings aren't completely without leverage. They could work out a sign-and-trade deal, which would actually benefit all parties involved. The Wings get assets back instead of losing Sabally for nothing. The Fever get their player, and Sabally gets her preferred destination. It's the kind of win-win-win scenario that smart front offices look for. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement also plays a crucial role here. The 2024 season is particularly important because we're approaching the end of the current CBA. Any long-term deal signed now could look very different under a new agreement. This timing adds another layer of complexity to the negotiations. There's also the marketing angle to consider. The WNBA is growing rapidly, and having star players in markets like Indiana could be crucial for league-wide growth. The business impact of Sabally joining forces with Caitlin Clark in Indiana could extend far beyond just wins and losses. We're talking about potentially creating one of the most marketable teams in the league. Let's break down what a realistic trade package between the Wings and Fever might look like, and why it could work for both teams. Based on insider reports and similar trades in WNBA history, we're looking at a package that could reshape both franchises. The most likely scenario has three key components: NaLyssa Smith, the 8th pick in the upcoming draft, and a future first-round pick in 2026. Let's break down why this makes sense for everyone involved. NaLyssa Smith is a young athletic forward who's shown flashes of brilliance. She's not Sabally, at least not yet, but she's got serious potential and could thrive in a new environment. For Dallas, getting a young talent like Smith helps soften the blow of losing their star. That 8th pick is crucial too. This year's draft class is being called one of the deepest in recent memory. We're not just talking about Caitlin Clark. There's serious talent throughout the first round. At number 8, Dallas could potentially land someone like Rickea Jackson or Angel Reese, depending on who declares. This gives them immediate help while also planning for the future. And let's not overlook that 2026 first-rounder. Sure, it seems far away, but in the WNBA, where roster continuity is challenging and one or two players can dramatically change a team's trajectory, future picks hold significant value. The Wings could use this as additional trade capital or hold on to it as insurance for their rebuild. For Indiana, this deal makes perfect sense too. Yes, they're giving up significant assets, but they're getting a proven all-WNBA talent who actively wants to be there. That last part can't be understated. Having a star player who genuinely wants to be in your market is invaluable for team culture and community engagement. There's also the timing factor to consider. If Indiana waits for free agency, they risk getting into a bidding war or, worse, seeing Sabally get cored by Dallas. Making this trade before free agency officially begins gives them exclusive negotiating rights and ensures they get their target. Looking at similar trades in WNBA history, this package aligns with what we've seen for star players. Remember the Tina Charles trade? Or more recently, the Darica Hamby deal? Star players typically command young talent and draft capital in return, which is exactly what we're seeing proposed here. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of this potential deal is what it could mean for future WNBA trades. We're seeing players become more assertive about their preferred destinations, and teams are getting more creative with trade packages. This could set a precedent for how future superstar moves are handled in the league. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into what could be the WNBA's biggest trade story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more WNBA coverage. Thanks you subscribed the channel.